Recording. Okay. Hi, everybody. So welcome again. I can't believe that we have another 2 lectures left after this one before pitch day. So really excited about that. I'm sure there'll be more questions as we get closer as to what this entails. There will be external judges. For the first time, we're going to try this thing out. This is a brand new thing, by the way. It wasn't something we did last cycle. So we're going to see how you guys do in this new sort of format. Okay, so thank you for being our experimental setup. Okay, some quick things. Communicate. So please enter your availability. I sent you guys the invite for pitch day. Please just say yes, so I know you are. Well, you have to be there, but please just say yes, that I know that you got the message. Okay, if you haven't yet. It's a calendar invite for the May 15th. If you have people that you want to invite, that's perfectly fine. We have, it will be live streamed, so pretty easy to invite anybody. So here's the link, it's in the chat right now. Please help us get more people to come. We will have a separate, so the Zoom will be in this Zoom room. So if there are people that you want to attend in here directly, just send me their email and name in Slack DM, and then I will just send them the calendar invite. But if you want to just share on your Twitter or something, use the Eventbrite page, because I would like to have a close cohort internal folk for you guys. But yeah, so that's the main thing. And let's see the thing about your friends, and then the CollabX as well. There are a few of you said that you're really interested in what happened last time. So the next one is June 11th. This will be after pitch day, but it's totally fine because you as alumni will have access to this anytime we host it. Okay, so please sign up. I put the link in the central square. So it should be exciting. We're going to be inviting some external people this time to join us. So every time we have a CollabX event, there'll be new people that you can run into. And that's the exciting part, I think. That's there. And thank you for a lot of your feedback to continue trying this thing out. Okay. With that said, today we're going to get into a case study, and Matt has, thank you, huge thanks to Matt for agreeing to showcase his project, shall we say, organization, right, as a case study for you guys. And we're going to go from everything we've been exploring for the past several weeks. You're going to get to see in a real world setting how that's going. And Matt is still in the midst of it, right? You are building this thing as you go. The plane is, we jumped off the edge. We are putting the plane together. So I hope this would be educational for you. And please, I think Matt, you'll be open to questions as we go through this. So
yeah, totally.
Feel free to jump in. All right, guys. As always, you guys know what to do. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Fanuel. Yeah, and y'all feel free to just interrupt me if I just don't explain something clearly, or if you just have a question. I will start my presentation. So, yeah, basically as of just a little over a year ago, almost 13 months ago, I'm the founder and CEO of Galactic Polymath, LLC. So this is something that I've been working towards for probably about 5 years. I'll kind of get into that. My background is as a biologist, so I was working on multimodal signaling and the evolution of sexual communication in birds and spiders in my PhD and first postdoc work. And then as a postdoc at the University of Nebraska, I started a science communication conference at the University of Nebraska, still ongoing. I think there won't be another one this coming year, but the year after. So if you're interested in that, it's a cool conference. I've written for the popular press, made videos that have won some small outreach awards, and been recognized for broader impacts. As you leave academia and start getting into business, you need to learn how to brag about yourself. Don't be humble. But so 2 years into my first postdoc, I realized I don't want to be a professor. But then, I was like, I find this outreach education stuff to be more fulfilling, but what do you do? What careers are there? And if you don't want to go into mainstream kind of journalism, there's really not much infrastructure to support training and entrepreneurship in this kind of emerging SciComm area, aside from, say, SAI. This is kind of trying to create a new, a new service to prepare people for kind of launching their own. So choose your own venture path at this point. And part of my motivation for wanting to do this career pivot was just recognizing that as a scientist, we're professionally motivated to spend most of our time and effort and huge institutional money to translate new knowledge only for peer experts, which is a diminishingly small proportion of the public. You can also teach undergrads, you can write something for the popular press, but again, these are kind of like niche groups. I mean, this is all important. I don't want to detract from this. I'm just saying that, like, what I was recognizing is that there is a key part of this audience that we're not able to connect with at any scale, and that's K-12 students. And so I went out in search of like how to bridge this gap. And so my career transition led me into classrooms in Metro Nashville Public School. So I'm in Nashville right now. And I spent the last 3.5 years as a resident scientist with Vanderbilt's Collaborative for STEM Education and Outreach. So I was at middle schools 5 days a week as a resident scientist, collaborating with teachers to translate, research into kind of data-rich interdisciplinary lessons that, I worked with every subject from, math, social studies, English, science, but also like band and STEAM. So this is a pretty unique, I was actually a postdoc at Vanderbilt while doing this position. So it's a pretty unique position. If you're interested, let me know. There are postdocs that rotate through here pretty frequently. So I can give you a lot of information about that. From my experience working with teachers and having kind of countless conversations and 50 formal interviews, I find that current published lessons are too abstract or rote. I mean, this is something we all got from school, probably. They often lack rigor or accuracy, and they're often not active. And so like this, basically like this is what the big multi-million-dollar companies are producing and selling to districts, and then teachers have to do the hard work of de-abstractifying them, making them relevant to students, adding rigor, making them active and interesting. And that's a lot of work for teachers. And they're also just not creative, so the teachers have to then, make games and puzzles and, kind of build these other engagement aspects to it. And yes, they're not relevant and memorable to the students. And it's no surprise that a huge proportion of the American public, is not science engaged, because why would they be if this is how they think science works and this is what science is? And so that's also why if you ask teachers what their favorite education publisher is, they usually say me, as in themselves. So think hard. Remember a professionally published K-12 school lesson that changed you. You probably can't. I'm assuming that if you're thinking of something that was meaningful, it was because of an amazing teacher that went out of their way to create something that was kind of their project. But like the actual published stuff coming out of the education industry, which is a huge growing multi-billion-dollar ed tech sector, is not changing people. Now think about a video game, movie, or book that changed you. You can readily think of things that you reference daily that are memorable, and I would argue that a huge reason for this is that the movies and video games have budgets from $1 million to hundreds of millions of dollars, where you're funding teams of possibly thousands of talented people for years to produce an escape that may last a few hours. And yet when we talk about education, which is supposed to prepare every citizen for life and a fulfilling job, the budget is often nothing, or a shoestring budget that, one or a few people produce in a short amount of time, sometimes just the night before. So, escapism, prep for life, this is actually pretty nuts. So it's time to invest in education content, I would argue. And this is also something you don't hear as much about. You hear about, a lot of the other problems, the infrastructure, we need to pay teachers more to attract talented people. We need to, invest in, technology, getting access to tech. But if what they're accessing is garbage, it's still going to be a hard time for students to learn. So why is content so bad? Most of us are researchers here. We're highly engaged in getting things out to the public. You have other nonprofits, government entities, and sustainable brands that all care about educating the public about vaccines, climate change, cancer risk, green energy, you name it. And they want to convince that, they want to engage the public in all these topics, but they can't, because traditional publishing dominates the classroom. And part of that is because education has become very complex in terms of like the, what teachers are required to do and how they're expected to do it, in terms of standards and things like that. And so they don't have the skills to navigate that, to plug into a classroom natively. And also traditional education publishers, in addition to, producing these, bad products, education products, they're also selling to districts, not teachers. And I think that's important, because content only needs to sound good to the superintendent. And teachers are often forced, like, well, we paid $5 million to get Discovery Education's, product, and then the teachers don't have any input on that decision. And nor does anybody at the higher level listen to how it's actually functioning in the classroom. Also, selling to districts widens inequality. So rich districts can obviously buy more. And in particular, in the South, where we tend not to invest a lot in public things in general, but this leads to huge divergence between private and public schools, and the haves and have-nots. So, but what's the alternative? So how can we improve education content and increase access to it? It seems impossible. And it would be if you were using the same funding model that we have, selling to districts. So I am testing a hypothesis of funding education in a fundamentally different way, which is funding education on the production side to achieve the outreach goals of clients. So I'm aligning the desires of organizations that want to educate the public with the needs of teachers and students. So I'm kind of pioneering the term education studio, which is analogous to an independent gaming studio or movie studio. So, kind of a small scale creative agency. We translate any body of knowledge into creative, high production, open access K-12 lessons to achieve outreach for clients. So this is kind of a schematic of how it would work. So our clients could be researchers, nonprofits, sustainable companies. I'm most familiar with the researcher segment, obviously, as a researcher, but we're exploring these other groups as well. And so basically we take their real research, their stories, and their personal stories, and kind of weave that in with real data, their career experiences, and to create these rich, real learning experiences that students will take home and not shut up about when they talk to their parents at home. We want them to just take this stuff out of the classroom and enrich their lives. And by doing so, we generate value for the students and the teachers to use our materials, which also is valuable to the client. So we can measure, who accesses this stuff, what do they say about it, and then provide transparent metrics of outreach impact. So this whole broader impacts initiative at NSF often totally lacks transparency. And so by measuring and reporting these things, we can sort of add rigor and transparency to the whole outreach effort. So let's talk about our customer segments. Researchers are the most straightforward customer segment because the National Science Foundation funds $6 billion in grants yearly, of which about 10% of each grant can go towards a required broader impacts outreach criterion. So that's about a $600 million available market. There's a similar available market. It's hard to assess nonprofits. But if we just look at STEM, education, health, or conservation related nonprofits, that's approximately a $611 million available market. Also, increasingly, there are what are called certified B Corps and social enterprises that have a triple bottom line in their sort of mission, which is to maximize not just profits for shareholders, which has traditionally been, you know, business motivation, but like profits, people, and planet. So maximizing, you know, social benefit and environmental benefits with profits. And so because of those new funding models and kind of a new vision for sustainable corporations, I think there's a strong motivation to do something seen as a public good like this. And especially if it is translating a body of knowledge that's relevant to their whole marketplace, like in designing products for, you know, circular economy and, you know, or you know, to have a longer lifespan and to, you know, produce less waste at their end of life, which usually, you know, requires people to pay more. So to pay more, they need to value it. And to value it, they need to understand it and why it fits into climate change and bigger problems that we're experiencing. So as a proof of concept, I've been working on a lesson adapting my research from a paper that we published last October. So this is looking at neglected female song in one of the most common and most well-studied birds in the world, the barn swallow. And so we're looking at female song, how it's been neglected, you know, since people have started studying birds. And this figure is actually from the study, and we use that as one of the key learning assets. So I'm just gonna stop talking for 4 minutes and let you watch this trailer. So this is a trailer that we prepared that explains not just the lesson, but like kind of what, you know, what we were hoping to convey in it, and you know, why this adds value to teachers. Hi, I'm Matt Wilkins, founder of Galactic Polymath and the lead author of the study this lesson is based on. My co-authors, the other scientists who made this research possible, are Drs. Karen Odom, Lauren Benedict, and Becca Safran. With this lesson, we were not just trying to summarize our studies so that students could understand what we did and why we did it to follow along in the footsteps of scientists, but we also wanted to convey something deeper about what drives us as people, our sense of curiosity about phenomena that have been neglected or unstudied until 2021, as well as the methods and tools and the mindset we use to address complex problems. But we also wanted to convey a bit of the creativity and collaboration, which are essential to any modern research project. But our science is also really cool, okay? So to talk about that, I'm gonna hand things off to Dr. Lauren Benedict, who is one of the world's leading researchers in female birdsong.
Thanks, Matt. I'm really excited to be part of this project. It was a lot of fun to work on it with you, and it really brought together my passions that have to do with birds and education. And I've been studying birds for a while now, and I think that birds are just such a great system for studying because everybody sees them, everybody hears them, and students can really start to engage with that topic because they all know what a bird looks like, and they've got them in their yard and they hear them singing. So birdsong is something that people really connect with. They like it, they're interested in it, and it can really get people involved in science. So that's fantastic. And then I also think that this particular study and this particular lesson plan are really exciting because it teaches us something new about birdsong. We hear it all the time, but most of the research that's been done has been done on male birds. And it turns out that female birds do sing. And sometimes they sing in species that might surprise us. So this study in particular is about the barn swallow. And for years and years, nobody ever reported female song. And this study is the first one that ever really looked at that. And that's exciting because I think what that teaches students is that if you go out and you spend some time looking at nature, you can discover something new. And that's not something that most students realize. They think of science as facts, it's solved, it's done, science is what it is. But of course, science is a process of inquiry. And if we can make new discoveries all the time, then that opens up new worlds for students studying science. So this lesson is great for that. And then I also really like the way that it forces students to engage with the numbers and graphs and charts And I know that it does this because I actually have two kids who are in elementary and middle school, and I tested out the lesson on them, and they enjoyed it. They particularly liked that it was a mystery for them to solve at the beginning. That mystery kind of drew them in. It got them excited about the lesson plan. And once they were in, then they were willing to look at the numbers and to draw some facts and to learn all of these skills that they need for good scientific inquiry. So it's been really exciting working on this project, and I hope that other people will find the lessons in it valuable.
All right, if you're ready to try this out with your classroom, check out our Teach It in 15 Quick Start presentations. It'll give you an overview of each part of the lesson and give you basic steps, differentiation notes, links to the videos, basically all you need to facilitate teaching this lesson, which is mostly student driven. And don't, cool. So that's a trailer that is basically trying to convince teachers to give us the time of day, because we live in an information saturated world, and people only have such, basically it takes time to build credibility with your audience, and basically trying to make it easy for them to see the value in something that's kind of complex. The first question is our content better? And I've spent a lot of time trashing big education. So like, is our stuff any better? Hopefully that video convinced you that it is, but we've also tested this out with a number of classrooms and students already. From a homeschool teacher, she said, "This is a fantastic lesson. I love how it combines actual research and allows students to see and understand the scientific process in action. Love it." 2 exclamation points. We had several 11th graders reviewing this. This one said, "I was able to understand the purpose of histograms. The questions and activities were fun to do and much more interesting to complete than the regular questions we usually have to answer." So that was nice. We also have an ongoing study of a different lesson that kind of, validates our entire interdisciplinary approach. So this is a different lesson, but it's also an interdisciplinary math lesson that is based around real data and adapting a study. This is about fish, actually, but from this study, we show that from a 2-day lesson, there was 43% long-term learning improvement. So that's in prep. So who is Galactic Polymath? So there's me. There's also, so I'm basically the one fully dedicated employee right now. But I also have a group of mostly volunteer or friendly contractors that make up our, so we have a product team, digital multimedia specialist, education specialist with an EdD, or education PhD, and a graphic designer who's responsible for basically how amazing our site looks. Hopefully you'll agree. And then we have dev teams that have volunteered or given very friendly contracts to do some heavy lifting to make our entire production workflow, to basically take all the different pieces and then make a beautiful, easily navigable lesson plan that allows us to also produce this kind of scaled up going forward to produce something really good with minimal effort. And we have a creative team. Caitlin Friesen is a multimedia artist. She's also postdoc at UT Austin. But we're going forward as we scale up. I'm going to be relying on short-term contract artists and video editors to complete different assets that are required to teach and support the lessons. So if you know anybody or you're interested, you have some skills, reach out. I would love to hear from you. So the timeline for this is, obviously, I said this has been a long-term career pivot from basic research to running an education company. So many years in the works, but most recently I left my position at Vanderbilt in February. We launched our new website April 1st. And so we got our first paying client on April 15th. And yesterday we got our second paying client. So thank you. We have some stuff in the works. But going forward, we're just going to be doing the work, building a catalog, our teacher community, because you got to build credibility with your users in order to be able to, say to our potential clients, we have users. So we're not valuable unless we're building both ends, which is a challenge, but, we're doing it. So key performance indicators. So Fanuel wanted the KPIs. So let's talk about it. So clients, researchers, and organizations. So obviously clients and money coming in is one of our biggest indicators of success. So bids won. Early on, I got a couple of outreach grants from the Animal Behavior Society and the Society for the Study of Evolution. There are small pockets of money if you're creative that you can reach out, and if you're used to shoestringing it, this stuff can really help. And so our first job is from the Goyes lab. It's a small thing, but you start small, and basically she wants to build a proof of concept lessons on these Bornean guardian frogs. They're super cool because females actually call more than males. So they have a sex reverse system is pretty interesting. Counterpoint to the barn swallow. And the Fitzpatrick lab is our job from yesterday. So this is 6K that we may be able to expand. This is looking at genetic rescue in fish. So we're starting to broaden our portfolio, still in biology, but I have some work. I'll mention other potential leads. Bids lost, we found out we did not get an NSF grant. That would have been a big deal. So that would have been a 17K job. And then Fanuel and I think it was 7K. We applied for a grant to expand JobViz, which I won't talk about too much here, but we'll try again. So qualified leads, if you've looked into marketing lingo, you got leads and then you got qualified leads that can actually make decisions. And so qualified leads are people that run a lab and can actually hire you. In my case, so the Fallen Lab is going to write us into a grant for a decent amount of money. So we have a few things in the works, looking from quantum computing to spider vision. I don't actually know what the Russell Lab. I think it's bees. But so that's kind of the client state of affairs. There's a couple of things I didn't mention, but got to have lots of irons. The sales cycle on this is going to be pretty long, probably years. So you got to keep it going. So a larger problem I kind of alluded to a couple of times is just, the teacher community, building credibility with teachers, because, there's thousands of lessons out there on the internet. How can you convince them that, yours is worth giving even a few minutes to? And it's a reasonable question. And part of that, I think, is you got to figure out, as starting anything, figure out what are your shortcuts. How can you cut in line and not do the slow one by one growth? And part of that is figuring out who are the influential nodes in your sector, and then getting them to evaluate what you're doing and to help amplify your message. So to do that, you have to get their time, which if they're influential, they're probably getting lots of people asking them. So that's hard won a lot of times. So a lot of times that's just a numbers game. Just finding lots of those nodes and contacting every one of them. And you also need a good product if they're going to amplify you. So, timing that when it's ready can be a little tricky. So what I did was I figured out that, one of the influential teacher groups in the US is winners of the PAMST. I don't know if anybody pronounces it that way, but it's the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. So every year, these teachers from across the country, I think it's supposed to be 2 teachers per state get this award. And so it was on this website, right? But their information is not easily available. So I found this instant data scraper tool, which I would recommend to anybody who wants to get profiles from a website, or you want to data mine stuff. This is super intuitive. And literally in like a minute, I was able to figure out how to use this thing and import stuff. So it saved me hours of work. Anyway, so I built this spreadsheet with all of the winners of this award. And using another tool called Gmass, I was able to mass mail, merge mail, all of these people. Actually, all I had was their names and their locations and schools. So I actually had to spend hours finding them on the internet. Teachers are really hard to find. They have like no digital footprint a lot of times. Anyways, the advantage of using this tool is that you can, put in a little bit of code here. So it pulls from, you link it to the spreadsheet and it pulls in their first name so they get their customized email. But it also gives you link tracking abilities if you do it right. And I didn't the first time, but what that does is tells you who opened it and whether they replied and whether they clicked your links. So this one wasn't tracked. So from this, I know that 60% of my target audience opened my email, which is good. And the click rate was 20% for the one link I included correctly. And then the reply rate was also about 18-20%. So this is good. Those numbers are pretty good, I think. So that means that I'm connecting with somebody who seems to see the value in what I'm doing. And also that my subject line wasn't off-putting, so it didn't go to spam, didn't, put them off immediately. So that's good. So I'll just keep churning on that, figuring out other award-winning teachers and, building my network. So then also building relationships within existing structures. So it's not just individual teachers. Obviously, there's higher levels of, credibility. So connect with school districts. So I've built relationships with Metro Nashville Public Schools, where I'm located, with the STEAM director and also the STEM director at Lincoln Public Schools in Nebraska. And I will be reaching out to others. That's what we have now. And then also some folks that are higher up in the National Science Teachers Association, which is incredibly influential, at least within science. And so they are actually this week sending out our first lesson profiled in their freebies newsletter. So lots, probably thousands of teachers subscribe to this. So that really helps. So we're just kind of slowly building up our network and contacts list to be able to distribute this stuff at scale once we produce it. Because I don't want to sell it. I just need people to use it, to see it and value it. It's free. Not sure why I can't advance. Okay. Okay, so Google Analytics is obviously a great tool to be able to figure out, who's visiting your site. So, we're 0 here. This was a spike we got on April 1st. That was when we actually launched the site. So we had 113 visits on that single day. I think that's pretty good. It's not Amazon.com, but basically your gains are slow when you're starting from 0. And being able to monitor that and keep track of it and know, to have hypotheses for what's driving this. You can also just explore, who your referrals are coming from. So setting up Google Analytics, there's a learning curve, but it's it's pretty intuitive to get the basic stats. Okay, we'll just talk about challenges in everything I just talked, setting up. It seems like I'm getting a decent amount of success right now, but some obvious challenges early on are just organizational structure, both the organization itself, but also just your own workflows is a tremendous thing, keeping organized. Funding is obviously really challenging initially. Figuring out personnel, especially when you don't have funding, requires some creativity and generous people a lot of times helping you, and also just figuring out how to streamline your pitch and be, try to be charismatic, but also especially, we're all experiencing this during the pandemic, just multiplies the difficulty of any of this. Everybody's fried and has shorter bandwidth for anything, so asking people to do something for free or for little pay is a lot. Defining the product took a long time for me. So, it's easy to criticize. It's harder to come up with something better. And so that has taken a year. Like basically I designed a great lesson and we tested it in the classroom. Students, teachers loved it. But it was on a Google Doc. And I would show it to, I actually reached out to a Tennessee PAMST winner, and she looked at it and she's like, this is great. And I was like, but I mean, basically I couldn't get very many people to look at it because it's a Google Doc, and like, it's hard for people. It doesn't scream production value. And a lot of times that's what's required, right? You need the shiny wrapper. And so we spent a year designing a shiny wrapper for essentially the same lesson. And now people are like, dang, this is great. Once they go to the site. But again, getting the 30 seconds it takes for them to click that site is actually very difficult. Never underestimate that. Marketing, I kind of just alluded to that. Not knowing how to run a business. In fact, as a scientist, we're trained, it's like an anti-business degree. You're trained all of the mindset of running a business poorly, which is like undervaluing yourself, and also just like not knowing how to sell something or whatever. It's like, but it's just interesting, right? Like, let's just do this. It's a different world. So the legal pieces, forming an LLC versus nonprofit versus a sole proprietorship, that's a whole, it's two cans of worms. Just systems and endless tools. I mean, every time I've tried to choose some kind of system or yeah, project management tool or whatever, there's thousands of options, and it's difficult to even evaluate them until you start doing it. And then you're like, yeah, anyway. Technical web development is a huge challenge. So those are all kind of obvious things. I think we would probably all kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. But then you have not so obvious things like, if you build it, they may not come. So like, you have these assumptions, whether you're aware of them or not, that, you know, certain things are just so, and then you may get pretty far down the line and find out that's not actually the case. Like I'm expecting that I'm really expecting that teachers want interdisciplinary education. I mean, I am like very committed to that need. And if that turns out not to be a sizable proportion of teachers, that's a problem. So that's what we say, you know, fail early. So, you know, test these hypotheses, get it as, you know, I say in the previous talk, you know, I said launch early, but I mean, launch ugly. So, I mean, that's kind of true, right? Like you need to launch ugly, but not too ugly, but, you know, so like finding that area and like just testing it repeatedly, you know, like don't wait till it's perfect to show it to one person, you know, like show the ugly version to some people that you trust, show a slightly better version to a bunch more people. And then when it's finally good, then show it to, but don't wait until it's great. Like only show it to, you know, whatever, you get it. Defining the minimum in MVP and minimum viable product is also hard. And that's kind of what I was just talking about, is like, when is it good enough? When do I show it and who do I show it to? Resistance from perceived allies. This was something that I really didn't expect. And this is partially just inertia, status quoism. If that's a word, it's not a word, but we'll go with it. Basically, you know, I expected that, like, you know, I'm creating value for researchers. I'm making their life easier. Just contract me. I'll make broader impacts simple for you and more impactful. And a lot of people get very territorial about that. And especially you can see people who have spent a lot of time, you know, possibly decades building an outreach program. And, you know, especially if I start, and I hope I didn't offend anybody when, you know, I'm saying like, you know, that the after school audience doesn't matter. You know, I think that stuff really absolutely does matter. I think engaging with the public everywhere and anywhere they are is super essential and important, right? I'm just saying that the formal classroom has been kind of unavailable for outreach for forever. So, but, you know, this resistance from perceived allies probably applies to anywhere. You know, people who have been doing this work, you come in and say, none of this is working, you know, that's not a great empowering message. So, yeah, I don't know, just tailor your message to your audience. Project management, like, you know, it's hard, but it's like, it's really hard, especially when you start getting into multiple teams and like different projects with those teams, and like, what do you use and how do the different, we have a diverse ecosystem of tech products that solve different problems, and there's a lot of overlap, and some things do some things better than others, and like the handoff may not be clean. So like building a workflow is depending on what you're doing, obviously. For me, it's very complicated and hard. Managing people, especially with no money, like how do you, it's like, you can get people to volunteer easily. Most of those people are not going to do anything for you. Just know that. And it's just human nature. People want to be helpful, but they always overestimate their availability. And if you can be honest on the front end of that, and just say, like, you know, provide specific expectations. Like and this is really hard, right? This is delicate for somebody who wants to give you their time and their expertise for free. But you say, I need you to be able to commit at least 3 hours a week. I find that that's a pretty good, you know, if they can't do 3 hours a week, they probably were going to do much less. So that's not that helpful to you anyway. And it turns out that even if they think they're going to do 3 hours a week, they're probably going to do less anyway. So, but that's how you start. I mean, and you may just have to get a lot of different volunteers and just keep recruiting people. And some people are just going to have to back away, disappear into the shrub like Homer Simpson. But like that, just, you know, it's natural, and everybody has all kinds of stuff going on. But it is just really challenging because it takes up your time to manage folks. And especially y'all who are grad students, like never a busier time in your life. It's really hard. So, okay. So we have a little bit of time. So what do you want to talk about? Here are some suggestions. I didn't mention, so project management, we can get into the weeds on any of this stuff if you're interested. But Job Viz is another tool I didn't mention, but like this is a career exploration tool I spent a lot of time working on, that lets kids explore the 1,000 most common jobs. Like people say you can do anything, but they don't tell you what anything is. Like you know the handful of jobs you've had experience with, but that's it. This allows you to explore all of them, and we plan to connect it to every lesson so they can explore careers that are connected with the lesson, and also make that easier for teachers to bridge that gap. But that's all I had. So, and if you want to reach out to me offline, that's my information. So thank you.
Yay. All right, Matt. So you guys will have to do all that in less than 5 minutes, okay? Lots to dissect in here. I'm gonna have to pass it to Yefei. I think you put in some 2 questions in there. Do you want to get started, Yefei? Please unmute yourself and
yeah.
pick your question, because I think you had a lot of stuff.
I just dropped whatever was on my mind. Thank you, Matt. My first question is, I think you mentioned Nearpod in Slack. Does your lesson exist in Nearpod, or are they also in other formats at the moment?
Yeah, so especially since, you know, I launched the company during COVID times. So it became immediately apparent that like everything I had designed up to that point was classroom ready. But then I was like, so what do you even do for remote? Yeah, I think this is, everybody who was teaching went through this too, probably. So I had to kind of decide like whether like do I just focus on classroom or remote, or do I do both? And so I opted for the latter. And so I think for most of our lessons, we're going to try to, so we have a workflow that allows us to make it ready for classroom and ready for remote. So it's delivered. We have the share link in Nearpod. So if you have your Nearpod, you can just add it to your library. But we also provide the slides with the Nearpod. So like the Google Slides. So you can edit, you have full editing capability on the Nearpod version, but we also have a separate set of versions that are classroom. It's designed differently. instead of having the interactive, pieces that are Nearpod pieces like embedded, the interactivity is made for a classroom. So like, you have prompts for the teacher to lead discussion, and you have a lot of the interactive responses on a worksheet. So does that answer your question?
Yes. Yep.
Thanks, Yafei. Feel free to jump in and ask away.
Okay. I was like pausing for anyone else with questions in the comments. I did post the second one too, Matt, about like your approach on the school side. I'm assuming that, as you get bigger, your vendors are going to be like, look, I'll give you X dollars, but I need to see X, Y, Z from this. I'm curious if so far, like the expectation from clients about how many students your lessons need to reach, if that's entered into the conversation. And then if it has, I'm wondering like how you perceive one day going towards like a district person.
I mean, we do have district contacts so I alluded to, I have connections with the STEAM director at Metro Nashville Public School, which is like an 80,000 student school district, and Lincoln Public Schools in Nebraska. So they've already agreed, they're excited about our content, they're going to share it with their teachers. So we have district buy-in in those two districts, and we're just going to start expanding. But I've also tried to tie into these centers of influence like National Science Teachers Association. I think a lot of the district coaches and leads are also on those listservs. So we'll get some pickup there, but, we're going to do organic growth. I'll end up going to trade shows and stuff and kind of rubbing elbows with folks. We're not trying to sell to them. So it's a pretty easy, buy-in, I think, because we're offering better content for free. What you're saying about the customer though, the brilliant thing is the level is so very low with broader impacts that I'm already able to offer more than most broader impacts projects have in terms of the impact, number of students that can access them. So I think, we definitely have growing pains, right? But it's just doing it one step at a time.
Indeed, one step at a time. Questions?
I had one question. First, Matt, this was super great. You've like shared like tools and stuff that you have discovered, and those have been really like cool to find out about. But like seeing how your workflow strings together into this narrative is like super cool to see. So thank you for presenting to all of us. Is there a way to become like an NSF contractor? Or I think of like a lot of PIs know that they don't want to do accounting or grant management, like elements of their grant, but they know that they have to. And so they just say in their grant, oh yeah, we're going to hire so-and-so to like do the project management piece or do the accounting piece. And like, where is the manual of contractors that NSF knows and loves? And like, how do you get into that book? Or does that book not exist yet?
I don't actually know. So NSF has a library that is searchable of contractors. So you have to be listed. So we're listed. There's something called SAM, the SAM system, like Uncle Sam. It's an acronym, but I think it's a backronym, honestly. Like they wanted it to be Uncle Sam. So, but yeah, we're in both of those. NSF has a separate and listing from, yeah. So
it is Sam, yeah.
Yeah, so we're in that system, but I think a lot of that, I think people don't necessarily go through that. It's word of mouth a lot of times. So I think just generating a body of work that researchers are excited about to talk to their colleagues about is going to be one of the biggest generators of new clients, I think.
So as Sarah last time told you about informal science, I think that also has a database. Now that's for evaluators. To your question, evaluators have their own big database there, and you can see what sort of like what grants previously they have worked on and shared reports. So I encourage you to check that out, because that's how sometimes I go in there and I just look for people and I read like their report. So I'm one of those people, I read the reports. Like page 3, paragraph 2 doesn't make sense, you know, kind of thing. But yeah, that's because I know people are not reading this, but it's a gold mine. It's just freely available, by the way, freely available. Safiq.
Yep. Hello, Matt. I totally agree with you in the beginning that you said translating research into practice is very hard. That's even in pedagogic research that I'm involved in. So, but I think it's similar to me, like developing a lesson plan. I'm translating pedagogy research into a practice because I think most teachers hardly read research or articles.
Yeah.
So my question is, because you involve researchers to develop lesson plan, in my project, I involve the teachers to develop the lesson plan based on research. So my question is, who decide the pedagogic approach in the lesson plan? And then is the lesson plan, the language is accessible for teachers to read? Because for example, sometimes when I put terms like statistically significant, then it might put off the teachers to read, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is, a consistent advice in business is like, just, test your assumptions over and over. So like, I mean, we do our best. So like, we have 3 people on the team that have classroom experience. So that helps, right? But who decides? Like our team will decide, in combination with our beta testers. So like, this is a big part of building community with teachers, is like, you want them to get excited about the latest thing that we're working on too, and to like, be involved in the development of this lasting resource that, it's like we're building something that can help the teaching community nationwide, potentially worldwide. And so, we want to have a bunch of stakeholders involved in the whole process to tell us what is jargon that we haven't identified, and like, what's working or isn't working with different groups of students, and differentiating those versions. So, yeah, it ain't easy, but like, I think we're trying to involve the right people to make those decisions the right way.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Naisha?
Everybody's like, hopefully not too overwhelmed.
Thank you, Matt. I think I'm going to be following your work because I have, like, my project has some similarities, and I love your presentation. So my question is regarding the product, like to make it more appealing, I guess. Like, is there something else beside the lesson that comes in the package? Like, is there support for a certain amount of time? If you make like updates, are the teachers still going to have access to those updates? Is there anything else, like after they buy the product, what's there, right? Like,
buy the product, like, do you mean buy in or
getting
like,
the lesson, like getting the lesson?
Yeah.
So I get the lesson, I try it with my classroom. Can I contact you to I don't know, get some sort of support, to tell you how it's going, to ask you questions, like that sort of support, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, so we have a form on the lesson that allows feedback. And then, so we have like let me just share my screen again. So like, we've come to expect versions and acknowledgements and that kind of thing a lot in software, but you don't really see that in education. So that's something that, we spend some time working on. So if you go to the bottom of this, there's version notes. And so we have actual versions of the lesson. And so like, we want to, going forward, acknowledge like Bonnie Flint, gave us feedback, which, led to, improvements in the lesson. And so I see that as, just a small token of appreciation for, the feedback, that people do at different stages. But yeah, right now it's just like, click this link to tell us how it went, give us, feedback on what grades you taught it to and that kind of thing. We want to make it more rigorous in the future, but, I don't have a tech team budget for like, $150K for a full stack developer to do that right now. So one day soon, hopefully.
And then you mentioned that you're in the process of writing a paper. I'm interested in doing that as well, but how easy or not it is in terms of consent, SIACOOK, things like that. Like if you're using data, right, from students, you're getting the data from students. Is the
Right.
school
So
giving
yeah,
you
you need an
permission?
IRB. Yeah, not IACUC, but
Yeah, not IACOOK. I'm
yeah,
sorry,
the equivalent.
IRB, yeah.
Yeah, the equivalent. Yeah, I mean, it's a hassle working with students in terms of like paperwork and getting parent signatures and all that. But I worked with, like the Collaborative for STEM Education Outreach at Vanderbilt. So like, they were used to doing that and filling those forms out. So they kind of guided me. So hopefully someone at your institution can help just partner with it, or teaching like an education researcher. Not sure what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's something like if I'm not part of, if I'm not affiliated to certain institution, I was thinking like, how can I do it, right? It's okay. So that sounds
yeah.
Yifei?
Yeah. So earlier in the presentation, you talked about this mismatch between what school districts want, what teachers want. School districts keeps maybe going down the wrong path, making purchasing decisions that aren't like best in line with what teachers have expressed their needs are. I'm curious about this, right? Because I worked in ed tech sales for a long time, and I know that problem. I'm curious, like, what's your thinking around how what you're doing is addressing that root problem? You mentioned that somebody from your work at I know this district person, so I'm going to talk to this person. That's a personal connection. That could happen fine with the first 12 districts that you develop personal relationship with. But if you're going to a Miami-Dade, to an urban city, an urban or county district where there's like 50, 100,000 students, you have no connection to that person. Like what insights have you developed that really is able to help you directly address some of those like root issue with why do districts keep making purchases that don't seem in line with what you think are right, or what you've heard that teachers want?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you say that like I don't need, like at some point I'm going to need to get district buy-in. I don't really see that as being totally true, because I'm not trying to sell to them. So honestly, it doesn't really matter. I only need them not to put up specific obstacles that take teacher autonomy away. So teachers in a lot of districts, they're required to teach certain standards, but they're not required to teach them using a specific, curriculum. In those cases where they do have a specific curriculum, I'm not trying to offer a replacement curriculum. I'm basically offering standalone modular lessons that teachers can use to teach really rich lessons to hit their targets. It's so like basically just plugs into any curriculum and it's free. So basically I just need buy-in from individual teachers, and teachers don't trust superintendents. Teachers trust other teachers. And so, what I really want to do is build credibility within the teacher community. So they're selling my product for me. It's a free product, but like, I just need them to say, hey, you got to try this thing. Like my kids, I've never seen them more engaged. They get this thing that I always struggle to make relevant to them, to just basically make their job easier. So that's my strategy. we'll see whether.
Like it's a free relying on the teachers to word of mouth. Yeah. And I can talk with you offline.
Yeah. I would love to.
Implemented that in so many ways, but I
Yeah.
think, my recommendation is not to say like, districts will buy this, but the line is murky between what the teachers want and what the districts want. And if you were to ever get to, 100,000, 200,000 teachers using content on a consistent basis across different vendors and clients, I think I would be curious to know, like, what are the conditions for something to thrive where the district will support it and the district won't put obstacles up for this? Because every day you're going to be battling some vendor trying to say, I want to sell this, but in order to sell this, the teacher has to not do that. There's not enough time in the instructional block for, all of these lessons to be done at once. Something has to give. So sooner or later, I do feel like, that insight is going to be really important. And I don't know what that is, but I'm curious about that because everyone's trying to figure out a way to get teachers to use products, without going down the top down district sort of thing.
But they want to charge teachers, and I don't want to charge teachers. Right. So I have an entirely different incentive system.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is the part I love. Next week, we're going to be talking more about funding, right? And how you support it. So Amanda, did you raised your hand earlier? Did you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I love this. This was a great presentation. I noticed that in your presentation, you had a graph looking at student scores on some sort of assessment. I was wondering what your other metrics were for learning or evaluating some of the maybe informal science learning moments in these classrooms, or if there were any.
Do you mean for the study that we're working on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that project is kind of on the back burner. So we haven't fully analyzed the data, to be honest. But I mean, we did student interviews. So we had like 100 students. It was like over 100 sixth grade math students that we tested before, did the pre-test, and then a post-test after our 2-day intervention. And then we did another test 200 and something days later. So at the end of the school year, to look at long-term retention. So what was actually interesting is we found that students really learned the biology, but like didn't learn the basic like connection, like being able to compare fractions, decimals, and percents, which was kind of the central math thing that we wanted to teach. That part went up and then came back down. So that was actually kind of interesting that and we did student interviews. So they, so we're going to like analyze basically like, overall, sentiment. They were pretty positive about it. They would like more of it. They liked the fact that it was using real data to do, their math lessons. And they liked the narrative around, the science. But apparently they didn't really learn the math. At least it didn't stick. So that's kind of interesting.
Thank you.
Sure.
All righty. Matt, thank you so much again. So it was wonderful to hear updates on what GP is up to. So clap for that. Yay. So this week, everyone, continue working on your SWOT analyses. You should have moved now into that graph, that table you guys are working on. So this is a chance for you to now take a really long look at what you're building and really go through all the different elements, right? What are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, right? What are the opportunities as you're building this, and then the threats that are there? And Matt sort of took us through basically all the different elements of his program, right? So you can use his program as a case study, of course, but I encourage you to look at yourself, right? Kind of a deep look, and use your mentors to discuss those different elements that are there. And of course, the pitch deck is continue building that. You saw a few of the elements Matt went over today. As well, right? So definitely be clear in your communication. We'll share with you shortly a guide and what the judges will be using Okay, something I'm developing, and so that you guys know what that is. But this, again, this is a friendly thing. It's not like like vicious or any kind like that. It's really designed to gauge you guys' this ability to communicate very clearly, okay, what it is that you're building, what's the problem, who's it for, okay, what have you done, what it currently exists that's different, what's different about what you're doing. Okay, and you saw Matt really trying to communicate all those elements throughout his presentation today. Okay, and so with that, have a good week. Next week, I will be with you, okay, as we close out the C5 cohort. We're gonna get into funding, okay? One of my favorite topics to discuss. We're gonna go into all these different funding models, grants, not grants, sponsors, all the other alternatives. And many of you have been asking me in our one-on-ones. If you have not scheduled a one-on-one, please do so as soon as possible. And you guys should schedule more of them, okay? I'm here to help you guys as an additional voice. All right, have a good week, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks for all the great questions.